Hey guys, John here from Sonic Drive Studio. I hope you're all doing well and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to take a look at this awesome little amplifier, the BluGuitar Amp1 Mercury Edition. I recently also did an in-depth demo and review of the Iridium Edition, which is basically the more modern rock and metal high gain edition of this amplifier. And this one sounds a little bit more organic, a little bit more classic, and a little bit more vintage, but it's still very versatile though. But I guess you could say that overall, tonally, this one is geared more towards the sort of vintage player. But that's not to say that this amplifier can't do modern tones, because it can. But the overall tone on this one is just a little bit more organic, a little bit more low gain, and I guess you could say it has a bit more of that vintage mojo. Anyway, I highly recommend also checking out my review of the Iridium up here or down here if you're interested. So what is this thing and what does it do? Well, it's basically a 4-channel, super compact and lightweight, full-fledged 100-watt amplifier. That's right, this little thing over here is 100 watts. Is it solid state? Well, yeah, kinda, but it does have this nanotube in the power section. And that really helps to shape the tone, feel and response of the power amplifier. It adds that natural warmth, compression and saturation that we all know and love from our favorite tube amplifiers. So if you crank the amplifier, at a certain point it will start to compress and saturate just as a tube power amplifier. And that's kind of what makes this amplifier so unique considering its size and weight. And at 100 watts this thing can get really loud. But rest assured there's also a low power mode on this thing, which is great for playing at lower levels, bedroom levels, practice levels, recording levels, whatever works for you basically. All the features are basically the same as on the Iridium, but let's go over them really quickly. This amplifier has 4 channels. We've got 1 clean channel and also 3 overdrive channels. We've got vintage, classic and modern, and they all have a different voicing and sort of different flavor. The amp also has a boost function with this dedicated switch over here. It's basically a clean boost that adds gain. And we also have a very nice reverb on board with this dedicated switch over here. And you can control the amount of reverb with this control over here. And the amp has a shared 3-band EQ for all the channels over here. And the EQ here is basically there to shape the overall EQ curve of the amplifier. So it's a very musical EQ that doesn't really respond as your typical vintage tone stack. So it doesn't really shape the character of the distortion, but rather the overall EQ curve, so that's a very handy feature. For shaping the character and response of the actual tone stacks, just like you would with a vintage tube amplifier, we've got the tone controls here on the side for the clean, classic and modern channels. And the classic and modern channels also have a dedicated volume control for balancing out the levels in between all the channels. And with the tone controls all the way counterclockwise, the tone gets very mid-focused and slightly dark. So that's basically a very good lead tone. And with the tone control cranked, so clockwise, the tone basically gets a bit more open and airy and sort of scooped, but without losing any of the mid-range really. So that's a really cool feature as well. And then for the boost, we've also got this control over here. And this basically lets you dial in the amount of boost that you want to add with the foot switch. We also have an effects loop switch over here that lets you put the effects loop either in parallel or in series. And then for the noise gate, we've also got some controls over here. You can set it to off, to metal, or to soft. And metal is basically a more aggressive noise gate, which is great for high gain, obviously. On the back, we've got the speaker outs, 16 and 8 ohm, the effects loop send and return, the guitar input, the recording out with an analog speaker simulation on it, and also the MIDI remote jack. You can basically connect the remote foot switch over here, and that basically opens up a lot of possibilities. I haven't tried that myself, but it will make this amp much more flexible for playing live. But this amplifier can do more. It has some sort of hidden functions on it, and I highly recommend checking out the manual to learn more about what this amplifier can do. But now let's go ahead and check out some tones with all the channels and a bunch of cool guitars. This amp will be fed through my 2-Notes Capture X because that load box works really well with solid state amplifiers, and then into York audio cabinets. The guitars will have no post-processing on them aside from a little low cut at around 80 to 90 Hz just to remove some low-end rumble. And let's try that with a unique guitar, the PRS SE Baritone 277 semi-hollow P90. I'm going to use the reverb for this tone, and the tone control over here is set to about 2 o'clock. And I've set the clean volume so that it barely starts to break up. It just basically starts to compress the sound a little bit, but without any real noticeable saturation. And this channel will be fed into the York FTWN 212D120 cabinet on Mix 01. Let's go ahead and take a listen right now. Great, that was a really lovely clean tone. Nice and sparkly, but also full. It basically has everything I need from a great clean channel and more, because if you crank the volume, you can get it to saturate very nicely, and even more so with the boost. So the clean channel alone is already very versatile. Now also some quick isolated bits. Alright, now let's move on to the overdrive channels, and let's start with the vintage mode. Now this channel has a very nice and unique saturation, and just as all the other channels, it sounds very organic indeed, kind of like a vintage Marshall style amplifier. And let's try this channel with my Fender Telecaster on the neck pickup, just for some rockin' mid-gain tones, kind of inspired by Rage Against the Machine. No reverb on these tones, and for this tone we're going through the York 212 M65 cabinet on mic mix 05. And the master volume is cranked up quite high for that nice tube saturation in the power section, just as with all the clips in this video basically. Somewhere around 6 or 7 is basically where the sweet spot is at for the power section. And for these tones I'm raising the mid control up just a touch for a bit more mid-range bark. Let's go ahead and check it out right now. Awesome, nice and thick. And this amp definitely sounds like a big old cranked tube amplifier. It's really impressive. Now let's also check out some isolated bits. Okay, now let's move on to the classic overdrive channel. This one sounds a bit more modern than the vintage channel. It sounds a bit more like a hot-rodded, sort of JCM 800 style amplifier. This channel basically does the brown sound. And let's try this channel with my Gibson Les Paul Standard 60s with the Seymour Duncan JB in the bridge position. The tone control over here is set to about 11 o'clock. No reverb, no boost, and for the cab tones we're using the York MRSH 412 M25 cabinet on Mic Mix 01. Let's go ahead and take a listen right now. Great British rock tones right there. Again, very impressive for this little amplifier. Now let's also check out those tones in isolation. Okay, and now let's move on to the modern channel, the most high gain mode that this amplifier has to offer. This channel to me sounds something like a cross between a Marshall DSL, something like a Soldano SLO, and an Orange. It has plenty of gain on tap, and the overall tone is sort of fluffy and loose, so not as tight as the modern mode on the Iridium Edition. So this one has a bit more of an organic low-end response basically. Great for rock, more alternative rock and doom and stoner and stuff like that. And let's try that with my Gibson Les Paul Custom in drop C sharp. And let's go through the York MES 212 V30 cabinet on Mic Mix 01 for a bit more of a modern cabinet sound. Again, no boost and reverb, and the tone control is set to about 1 o'clock. Let's go ahead and take a listen. That was a really fat sound. I really like it. Not super tight, modern and aggressive, but that's what the Iridium is for. but I really like the unique tones that this one has to offer in comparison. Now also some isolated bits. Okay, one more tone to go. Let's see how modern this thing can get and how metal this thing can get with the boost pedal up front, using my ESP LTD NW44 with the bare knuckle aftermath pickup, a very modern sounding pickup. And that guitar is tuned to drop C. We're going through the modern channel again, but this time I'm using the Laney Black Country Customs steel bark pedal up front, just to sort of shape the tone. I'm cutting off some bass and I'm raising the tone or treble control a little bit to add some bite and clarity. And on the EQ of the amplifier, I'm going to boost the bass a little bit over here to add some thump. So let's see how modern and aggressive this amplifier can get. And I'm using the same York cab as before, so the MES 212 V30 cabinet. Let's go ahead and take a listen. Awesome sounds, and now some isolated bits as well. Okay, so again, just as with the Iridium, this amplifier sounds really nice indeed. Nobody is paying me to say this, but I really think that the Amp1s by BluGuitar sound really organic. They really sound like a proper big old tube amplifier, no doubt about it. And this one definitely has its own character when you compare it to the Iridium, which is also very cool in my opinion. The pre and power amp tone and response is quite different. So they don't really have a lot of overlap tonally, but that's a great thing, I think. I also want to note that the packaging for these amplifiers is very nice and classy. You also get a little pouch along with the amplifier, and the user manuals are very professional. They look very nice, and all the information you need is in there. So those are just some nice touches for an already great product. That's all for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider hitting the like and subscribe buttons down below, as that really helps the channel out. Also, let me know in the comments down below what your thoughts are on the BluGuitar Amp1 Mercury Edition. You can also follow Sonic Drive Studio on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you guys very, very soon. Cheers!